Three, two, one, and we are back. Julie, it is another Sunday.
Yes, we made it again.
That's right. We're doing our Sunday debrief at the beach.
Yep.
This is something Julie and I have started doing a couple months ago. Actually, we did it more than a couple months ago, didn't we? We were doing
it's
this
been a while.
Yeah.
Were we doing this during the earthquakes? I think we were.
Yeah, we were.
So that's 6 months worth.
I just remember doing it at different beaches before.
Yeah.
Before COVID.
When we were allowed to.
Right.
Yeah.
So, that's interesting. So we may have been doing this for a long damn time. Who knows?
We have.
Well, this is our Sunday show where Julie and I are unfiltered, unscheduled, have no agenda, have no previous notions about what we want to talk about, and we just literally debrief. This is our version of, a brain dump, basically, where Julie and I just talk about the things that are on our minds and kind of bounce things back and forth between the two of us, and then maybe talk a little bit about what we're looking forward to. Mostly we're relating back to our coaching client stories because we've been coaching for so long, decades at this point, and have had over 100,000 coaching calls easily each.
We stopped counting that
I know.
years ago.
5 years, 6 years ago.
So it's more than that.
Yeah. Well, moral of the story is that we've known what happens is when you coach that many agents and you have that many conversations on an ongoing basis, you guys experience this too in your real estate businesses. I remember when Julie and I sold real estate, you'd certainly find yourself carrying some emotional baggage you didn't know you were carrying. But that's what we use the weekends for, is to sort of let that emotional baggage go. Because even as much as you think you're a professional, and as much as you know how to put up emotional barriers so that you don't end up giving too much away on a coaching call or whatnot, or you guys can relate to, maybe you're just learning this. One of the keys for long-term, ever-increasing levels of success and sanity, right? There's a new Harris rule. It is to keep an emotional barrier between you and the people you're trying to help, because we're all empathetic to one level or degree to another, and you find yourself absorbing the emotions of other people at too much of intensity, you're not going to leave anything for yourself. So anyway, long story short, that is what we use this Sunday debrief for, is so Julie and I can sort of do our purge. Yeah. So Julie, welcome to the show.
Thank you. You were talking about, kind of emotional management with regards to doing real estate. And I think in normal circumstances, we know from doing our own transactions, but certainly through coaching clients, when you buy or sell real estate, it generally brings out the best or the worst of you. And for a lot of people, it really is the worst. Not that they're bad people, it's just that it's so stressful, even in a normal situation. And then, you add some global pandemic and economic recession at the very least, and it's like, well, how do you think people are going to act? So one of the things that I've heard you say on coaching clients, and we certainly learned along the way, was to show emotion without letting yourself get emotional. That's really a big difference, right? You can have compassion and you can feel for people, but you've got to be really careful not to become a sponge and absorb all of it. You got your own stuff to deal with.
And by the way, if you guys hear strange noises, anything from, do you hear that music?
I do.
Okay. Anything from loud music to parrots flying by. We're not in our normal studio. We're outside and the wind is blowing and we're enjoying this beautiful tropical day in the Caribbean. And at the same time, I noticed Julie is checking her iPhone app about every 5 seconds for this hurricane that's supposedly coming our direction.
Yeah, and for those of you in Texas, our heart goes out to you with that Hurricane Hannah pounding you. So we've got our own probably on the horizon. We might be, they never know, but it's about a week away, I think. We'll see.
It's funny. You and I grew up in Columbus, Ohio, and we've lived all over the country.
Yeah.
And pretty much as soon as we were able, when we moved out of Columbus, we pledged never to live in a place again with snow.
That's true.
That was pretty much a minimum.
But we didn't say no hurricanes and earthquakes.
Yeah, I know. That's what I was going with that. We should have had a longer list.
Yeah, live and learn, right?
But if you do rule out hurricanes and earthquakes, okay, seriously, now I want you to think about this.
Right.
If you're going to rule out hurricanes and earthquakes, where on planet Earth does that leave you that you can live where you're not going to have winter?
Very few places, I think.
Name one.
Well, I don't know.
That's coastal. That's coastal where the average temperature is like 75.
In South America on the western side that doesn't get hurricanes. I don't know. South Africa, maybe?
Well, the point,
maybe?
You remember when you and I were, I'll tell you guys a funny story. So,
New Zealand. Well, they get earthquakes.
I think they get tsunamis too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so this goes to the fact that every place, and there's no such thing as a perfect place.
No, that's a good point.
So I'm going to tell you guys a funny story. Julie and I sold real estate in this area called, well, in our, basically our second part of our real estate career. We wanted a bigger challenge, so we moved house and business to New Albany, Ohio, and there was this really beautiful, gorgeous area called New Albany Country Club area, and it was developed by a guy whose name you guys might recognize from the Jeffrey Epstein sort of saga that's seemingly going to go on forever, Les Wexner. So Les Wexner was he's from Columbus, where Julie and I are from, and in Columbus, Les Wexner is like a king. It's difficult to describe how, I think, famous and influential he is. When you drive down, like Julie and I went for a couple of years, we went to Ohio State University, and you drive down Ohio State University, and even then, every second, maybe third building was named after Wexner, but now it's not every third building, it's like every building, and it's Wexner this and it's Wexner
tell them
that.
who he is.
No, I will. I'll get to it.
All right.
So Wexner founded originally the Limited, and the Limited, as you guys may or may not know, it was essentially through Les Wexner's chain stores, and it was limited. It was Victoria's Secret eventually. He bought Victoria's Secret. It was limited too. It was Express. It was Lane Bryant, Bath and Body Work, White Barn Candle Company.
Abercrombie, I think, for
Abercrombie and Fitch. And there's another one. There was another fancier version of
White Barn Candle.
No, I already said that one. Anyway, so he owned a bunch of brands. And these were...
Henry Bendel?
Yeah, he owned Henry Bendel.
Yeah.
But there's still another one that we're not remembering.
A lot is the point.
Yeah, so what he would do is he was developing real estate. He had come up with the concept that is sort of the modern mall, where it's essentially designed after an Italian or really any European village, where the center of the village is like some sort of meeting hub. Maybe it's a huge, what's that big water fountain with all the horses in it?
The Trevi Fountain.
Yeah, the Trevi Fountain, right?
It's a palazzo, basically.
Right, it's a palazzo, and then there'd be stores around it, and da-da-da-da. So what you guys will, what you're enjoying if you ever go back to malls, was essentially a vision that Wexner had. And then obviously he would have his tenants, or he would be a tenant, all of his stores in all these malls all around the country. So if you will remember, it wasn't that long ago that you'd go to one major city and then another major city, and there wouldn't be essentially clones of the same outdoor shopping areas. Well, the first one he built was in Florida, of these big outdoor shopping areas, and the next one was called Easton, which was in Columbus. And now rarely do Julie and I travel where there isn't another one that was essentially either built by or built to replicate the success of these outdoor shopping situations.
You can kind of tell by the mixture of stores.
Oh, yeah. Well, you can tell by the way it's designed. It feels like you're walking in a town.
Yeah, it's cool.
Yeah, it was really cool. So he was an absolute visionary. He's visionary for clothing, visionary for... it was funny when he started basically in the 70s, and there was a lot of people Julie and I knew that had stock in Limited before it went public that became families we knew, because we were just kids, into the 80s, who basically made a bunch of money off the stock going public. And it was later in life, obviously, we moved in Austin, Texas. There was a lot of Dellionaires, which people that made a bunch of money off Dell going public. Mm-hmm. Actually, this what I'm talking about now reminds me of EXP and all the people that are frankly becoming wealthy off the EXP stock.
Early days, right?
EXP Realty stock, guys. If you guys aren't buying it or following it, you really should be. It's amazing. So Wexner was, I won't even talk about any of the sort of the dark shadows that follow him around, because, they're conjecture and nothing's been proven. But he he is a billionaire, and he's in his 80s. And so here's a little something. Julie and I actually had a car cleaning and detailing business. We started this when we were in high school, and we built it through college, and it became actually quite successful. One of our customers was Les Wexner. Now, we never dealt directly with Les Wexner. So there was this organization, let me just take a sidestep and I'll swing you guys back in, called YPO, Young Presidents Organization. And the Young Presidents Organization, again, if you've never heard of it before, you should Google it. It has a very strong chapter in Columbus, Ohio. And so we started doing works for some of these YPO guys. And essentially, they're some of the most respected executives on planet Earth, and you have to be invited to be invited into it, and you have to basically be president of a company of a certain size before you're 40, was the essence of it. Mm-hmm. Now, there's a sister organization that Julie and I actually helped to found in Columbus called YEO, which is just Young Entrepreneurs Organization, but that's a different story for a different day. So the YPO guys in Columbus, we were fortunate enough to get work, to start taking care of their cars. In some cases, their planes, and in some cases, their planes and their boats. And they then would refer us to other people. So we ended up getting Les Wexner as a customer. But unlike all these other guys, because Les is obviously on a different level, he had private security. And his private security originally, when Julie and I were working on his cars, you go to his house, and he lived in Bexley, and you pick up his cars, and you meet one of the private security guys who are almost always local sheriffs, like deputy types that were just doing part-time work at Wexner's house as security. But as soon as he moved out to New Albany, all those guys were gone, and they were replaced by guys who were, now the rumor was ex-Mossad agents, which were basically like CIA special forces guys. I don't know if that was true, again, all conjecture, but they definitely were badasses. They were complete and total badasses, because they never talked. They never stopped staring at you. When we'd go out to work on cars for him, at that point, he would, then it would be like essentially a completely different experience. And it was funny, too. Always black Mercedes. Mm-hmm. That was his thing. Like, if you really want to look like the bad guy from from a Bond flick, and be associated with probably the world's worst criminal, as far as
I remember.
Yeah, Jeffrey Epstein. Well, that would drive black Mercedes.
Yes.
So fast forward. Les Wexner then starts secretly buying up land in New Albany, and then people eventually catch wind of it. But he had been buying up land for years, and nobody knew about it.
Well, New Albany back then, nobody would have thought about anything. I mean, that's where me and my sister went to ride horses, and we thought it took forever to get there.
Yeah, well, it did.
Back then.
It was just basically a wide spot in the road. But he'd been buying up farms. He'd been, formed a whole bunch of, entities that were buying up. He then, turns out, Columbus Dispatch breaks a story that he's bought all this land. He's secured all of it. And he's announcing that he's going to be building this incredible, this whole neighborhood thing, this whole community. And he did. And it's spectacular. And the buildings there, the houses there, you have to go onto realtor.com and just put in New Albany Country Club and click through and look at some of the pictures, especially the older ones that were built in the 90s. They're just magnificent. And Julie and I have traveled all over the world, and only when you go to like parts of England maybe do you see houses that were built to the same standard, the same level of detail.
Well
just ridiculous. Mm-hmm. You can just imagine a billionaire looking for a way to fill his days, so he wants to play architect, and that's what he did.
Yeah, very crafty.
Yeah, well, the New Albany the actual New Albany Country Club building won some sort of, like, the year it was open, it won some national design award, and supposedly Wexner had a hand in on designing the interior and exterior.
An eye for it, for sure.
And guys, remember, as we're telling you guys the story, Julie and I came from less than nothing, dirt poor, right?
And our first part of our career, most of what we sold were like 750 square foot. The garage was bigger than the house.
750 square foot for like 50 or 60 grand, just putting in perspective.
I used to call them a no bedroom, no bath, but they were 2 bedroom, 1 bath mostly.
They were like duck blinds. They were like duck blinds.
But yeah, there wasn't much to them except decent neighborhood and, better than renting.
Yeah.
So New Albany was quite a change.
Yeah, and we did that intentionally because we wanted to go up market. We wanted to sell fewer houses and make a hell of a lot more money, which is what we ended up doing. It was fun when we did that too, because it was after maybe our first year we became the most dominant listing agents in that market. And National Association of Realtors, do you remember that? They did that article on us.
Yep. Somewhere we still have.
You remember when those pictures came out? You and I go like, "Damn, we need to lose some weight." We're like, "Holy shit!
What? How'd that happen?"
We got fat.
No
we did
at midnight.
Right after that article came out, it was like a 3-page spread, and every one Julie and I looked worse and worse. It was horrible.
And that was with a professional photographer.
Yeah, we blamed the lighting.
That's right.
No, it was the pizza.
It was.
Well, so. That's where we sold real estate, but Wexner now is implicated in this whole Jeffrey Epstein thing. So when you guys hear all these things, and it's with the arrest of what's her name, the gal, I don't remember her name. Yeah, with Epstein's dead and this other gal that's still alive. With the rest of her, the thing that's bubbling up in Columbus are all the old dark shadows that are associated with with Les Wexner, and it is fascinating the things that are starting to come up. And one of the things is how we got started on this, by the way, is talking about how nothing's perfect. So I'll have to go back and talk about his house. Okay. Yeah, but one of the things that's really interesting is that the implications are that Wexner, through Epstein, are actually agents for essentially the Mossad and for the CIA. I mean, some of the things that are starting to bubble up are crazy.
It's a twisted tale,
when
for
you
sure.
when you get past the disgustingness that's associated with the underage girls, you get past the, which most people won't because they just want the sort of the disgusting part. That's what they want their story to be. Once you accept the fact that there was essentially people from all walks of life and all levels of influence that were visiting Epstein for more than a good game of chess, once all that comes out, then you really going to have to go back and you're going to have to think about, well, how was somebody like this able to do what he was able to do for as long as he was able to do it? And Les Wexner, it turns out, pretty verified at this point, was his only client. Was his only investor client. So the speculation seems to be running pretty thick that whole thing is going to start pointing towards a international blackmailing thing that had some, backing by, the U.S. government maybe, or the Israeli government. Who knows? I mean, it's going to make for a great Netflix series, that's for
I
sure.
know, and you know what people are going to say first? In Columbus?
Yeah, exactly.
What? That can't be true.
I hope it's not
How do
true
those people
because
even know about that stuff?
honestly, I hope none of it's true
Me
because
too.
I think what Les Wexner has done with his life
That's pretty
and
amazing.
what he's done
And he's
for
done a lot of
for
charitable
Columbus and what he's done
Mhm.
for the charity is amazing. So speaking of charities, getting back to my original point. So when Julie and I were selling real estate out there, they would have Les and Abigail Wexner would have the best parties at their house. And I'm not talking about I'm talking about parties that we never felt like we belonged there.
No.
I mean, we had some knowing looks from some of the old guard realtors who were out
Yeah,
there wondering
it's
how the
like-
hell we got in.
A little bit Downton Abbey, a little bit fashion show, a lot of kind of mystery, what's going on here. Just a different world.
I
Just for
don't,
us.
and I was never sure why we actually got invited to those parties. Sometimes it was a charity and you're donating money, but I wonder, truthfully, going back, whether or not it was because Wexner had remembered, and this is a reach beyond a reach, whether he had remembered that Julie and I had worked for him previously, taking care of his fleet of cars.
Well, I mean,
I
how
wonder-
else would we have gotten invited?
That's the reason I think. And
Yeah,
I think
it has
that,
to be a car connection
yeah, it has to be. Yeah.
because they were friendly with enough other old school realtors that it wouldn't have been that way.
Right, and
I
he,
don't think.
I don't think I never actually met Wexner. I never even exchanged
I
one
don't
word
think
with
so
him,
either.
never once. His wife, we had.
Yeah.
No, actually, we did. We met him once when we were
remember
walking
where.
into his mansion.
Yes, I do remember
there was
once.
there was the greeting line of the royal family. Remember?
Yeah, you know what I remember is that was when they had their little kids. They had 4 little kids back then, and they had the most giant stuffed animals in the foyer ever.
They did.
That's what I remember about
Yeah, it
that.
was around Christmas. Remember?
I think that was the same party.
Yeah, and he has this guy. I'll tell you what, the most amazing art collection. He's internationally known for his art collection. Here's the funny thing too. When we were taking care of his cars, he always had, he'd have Suburbans. He'd have always an SL, Mercedes S Class, and then maybe he'd have a Porsche 911, but usually not. And he just, he would just buy boring stoic cars and what.
Mm-hmm.
But I was always wondering why he didn't collect. Remember, I'm a car nerd, right? And Julie became a car nerd by proxy.
Mm-hmm.
So I always wondered why he didn't have cooler cars. So sure enough, years later, on the down low again, he builds the biggest, I think, probably most respected Ferrari collection in the world. And he goes about it building it just the exact way that he did in New Albany, where he starts buying through proxies. People don't know what's happening with the cars. And he'd take a car, and again, I know none of you guys care about cars, but I'm just going to tell you anyway because it's Sunday and, well, suck it up.
Just because.
So he would go buy, doesn't matter what Ferrari, and it would be something that would be incredibly rare and incredibly expensive. Ferraris are recession proof. Ferraris have become fine collector art where you can buy, if you are worried about your $20 million going down in value, you don't want to put it in the stock market, you don't want to put it in real estate, maybe you put it in gold. Well, one thing you definitely can put it in, if you can find one for sale, is a super rare, essentially blue chip Ferrari, and the money will at least stay the same, if not increase in value. That's what these cars have become. So he was buying these cars all over the planet, and from private collections. He had again the exact same way he did in New Albany. He'd have all these different people acting as his emissaries, and no one would know who the car was actually going to, and who cares, the check was big enough. And he was paying up for all these cars. And the thing that was shocking he would do, he did not, even if the car was originally white or yellow or it doesn't matter what, every one of them was repainted red. So his Ferrari collection now Everything, all of his Ferraris are red. I've only seen pictures. Okay, so I'll tell you another funny story, then I'll get back to my original point. So the Ferrari Club of America meets at Columbus, and they had done it once back in the 80s, so it's, every 30 years or so, they just pick different cities to have their big annual meet. So this was maybe 5, 6, hell, you know what, it's probably more like 10 years ago now. Probably even more than that. So the Ferrari Club of America meets in Columbus, and here it is, the hometown of Les Wexner, who has the world's rarest Ferrari collection, and of course, everyone from traveled all over the globe to meet at this Ferrari Club of America thing, and brought in their Ferraris, would ship them in, would fly them in. Just this is an extremely these things are things that. And by the way, guys, you'll be surprised. Not everybody that's into collecting cars are rich. A lot of them basically sacrifice housing, everything, lifestyle, because they have such a passion for certain types of cars. And that's the thing that's nice about being a car nerd. And some of you guys have hobbies like sports, very similar, where it breaks through the demographics. You can be standing at in a it doesn't matter where, looking at some extremely rare Shelby Cobra or something, and standing right next to you that you're having this wonderful conversation with is a guy that you later find out is a billionaire or something, or a famous musician. Or we've had all kinds of situations like that before. We were at a car show in I can give you example after example. We've met some amazing people through just basically being car enthusiasts, people you'd never guess were car enthusiasts. So Wexner had amassed this large, amazing Ferrari collection. The Ferrari Club of America was meeting in Columbus, Ohio. Wexner not only doesn't go to the Ferrari Club of America event, doesn't show up. Nobody knew whether he was or wasn't, but he didn't. Not only that, it comes out that he is people are saying, we want to go see your car collection. So he says, fine, but you have to pay to see it. So he ends up basically, and I guess a lot of people ended up doing it because these cars were so rare. I forget the amount he charged, but it was like $300. It was a lot per head to go see his car collection. So I just thought that whole thing was kind of actually hilarious.
The entrepreneur, right?
Yeah, exactly. You want to come see my cars, you got to pay.
I like that.
Well, so the reason for this story, Julie and I are at this party at his house, and we park the car, and of course there's valets there, not rent a valet, but permanent valets, and they park our car wherever the hell they parked it. And Julie and I walked up this pea gravel driveway, or part of it, and we get to the front door. It's the largest, tallest front door I've ever seen before.
It's like a castle.
I mean, honestly, how tall do you think the door was?
I mean, not even taller than like what you'd expect in a normal luxury home. Like 4 times that tall.
And when the door opened, there wasn't a sub
No.
door. It wasn't like it wasn't just a facade. It was an actual big ass door.
It's like something you'd see in Italy, really.
Yeah,
I mean,
totally.
That scale.
Yeah, but not like a medieval door where
No,
there's a
no.
sub door. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Where you have to lean in.
Yeah.
This was an actual door. It was
yeah, I know
probably
what you
had to probably be. I don't want to say 20 feet, but I bet
Who
it.
even makes hardware for something like that?
Well-
Now you've got me thinking about how this door was, but I remember that.
Yeah, that's the thing. And then of course the door slowly opens.
Yeah.
It's just ridiculous, the whole thing. And there's guess who? A butler wearing all black. Like I think it may have been like a ninja outfit. It was like something out of a
Something nuts.
Tarantino movie or whatever.
Yeah.
So we're there. We're at the party, and we're trying to not have everyone realize that we're just poor kids from the other side of town.
Blend.
Blend.
Glass of wine and blend. I remember I was afraid to get a glass of wine because I didn't want to spill it on anything.
Act like you know what the picture's about.
Yeah.
Pretend.
I also remember a lot of, I can't remember the artist's name, but those brass sculptures of out west stuff. I remember that.
Remington?
Maybe.
I think it's Remington.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's right. I
Yeah, he
remember
did have
those.
some monster ones, didn't he?
Mhm.
So the party's, nearing an end, and, you don't overstay and a deal like that. By party, people just rubbing elbows, really. So we're walking out, and we're standing, on the other side, on the outside of the house in this gorgeous courtyard. You guys should go online, by the way, if you're near a computer, and Google Les Wexner Estate, New Albany, something like that. And you guys got to see this house. You'll know I wasn't exaggerating. So we're waiting for our car. And I remember waiting in the courtyard for our car to be, couriered around. And I remember seeing way, 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 way on the horizon this bright, bright cross.
Mm-hmm.
And this cross was,
I know
a
what
cross
you're
as in a
talking
Christian cross. And then
Yeah.
what it was is a low, what is it, wattage, voltage,
Frequency, I guess.
whatever, AM radio station.
Antenna, yeah.
It was an antenna for a Christian radio station that had been there just forever. and it was clearly visible from the front door of his house as he was looking past this expansive property. I mean, now he's obviously got stables there. He's got guys. When he was building the mansion, because Julie and I knew some of these other YPO guys. One of the YPO guys we knew, I'm not going to mention his name, was one of the largest builders of schools in Ohio, but also in the entire Midwest. And one of his construction guys talking to their construction guys, evidently underneath this property, there were tunnels that were made connecting the main Wexner estate to the I guess you can only call it a mansion, but not at the same scale, that was also on the same property. That mansion that was connected through an underground tunnel was originally owned by a guy named Jack Kessler, and Jack Kessler was his right hand when developing New Albany. But for some reason they decided to have mansions on the same property, and there's been tons of conjecture about what the some reason is, but you guys can Google that yourselves too. But the tunnel was, again, I've heard that numerous times, and the construction guys, everyone out there, even the guy pushing the broom, had to sign non-disclosure agreements. But people are going to talk. So that same Kessler, if I remember correctly, ends up having to sell the property. Wexner bailed him out of some development thing off the coast of North Carolina or South Carolina, I don't remember what. Anyway, so long story short, Wexner bails him out, and then Wexner gets the house. So this house that was essentially Jack Kessler's originally is then given, it was sold to Jeffrey Epstein. So this has not come out in the news. Nobody talks about this. So you're hearing it here first. So the Jeffrey Epstein house was on the estate of Les Wexner's estate, as it is now. And again, if the rumors are to be believed, there was an actual, and I'm just guessing based on what other people told me, so don't hold me to this, but evidently, again, Wexner had a tunnel. This very same tunnel was still connecting those two properties on Wexner's estate. So beyond this former Jack Kessler, Jeffrey Epstein mansion, basically, way in the distance is where that cross was. Now, why does this matter? Mr. Wexner was Jewish, and there was, again, real estate people talk, and there were tons and tons of rumors circulating that Wexner had tried to buy that radio station, and had tried to buy that radio station even before anyone knew he was buying land out there. He just wanted to buy it for the sake of, I'm assuming, making it so that the cross on his distant horizon wouldn't be a distraction from the stars and whatnot. I mean, religion aside, it did look like a bit of a blight on his otherwise perfect property.
Yeah, well,
it was weird.
No matter what it was a big sign in the sky.
It could have just been a big, cowboy boot. The same thing. It was an eyesore.
Same
really.
idea.
Yeah, I mean, it was just a little
cell
obnoxious.
tower would have had probably less effect because it doesn't light up.
And so Julie and I are standing there waiting for our car, and we're seeing this whole scene going on. She and I are noticing the same thing way off in the distance, and it was way off in the distance. But out there were no city lights, so it was pretty damn bright. Yeah. And so the little epiphany she and I had, and we had it almost the same time, was no matter how rich you are, no matter where you live, no matter anything, how many advantages you have when building your property, just there always are going to be things that are wrong with it.
There's always going to be compromises.
There always are.
Well, that's true, because that was certainly, what is it, at least 20,000 square foot houses, beautiful land.
The house is at least 75,000.
Yeah.
Nobody knows for sure.
This is crazy.
20,000 square feet.
I don't know. That's still big.
That was the maid's quarters.
Probably. It was probably more like Epstein's house. But
yeah, probably.
But, I tell a similar story. Do you remember the treasure hunter who we helped?
Oh, yeah. Can you tell that story?
Okay, because it's the same point. No matter what your price range or your abilities are.
Oh, you're not going to run over that story. That story's too good.
Well, I'll start you out, and then you can finish it. I remember when you were first talking to him, and you were doing a little pre-qualification. He basically said his price range was something like $500,000 to $5 million, and it could be anywhere in Columbus. He preferred to have land and a nice house. Well, I mean, doesn't that sound kind of flaky to you?
Well, let me tell a story.
Yeah, go ahead.
This story's hilarious. Columbus, Ohio is crazy, and I'll tell you why it's crazy for a whole bunch of reasons. First of all, when you're from that part of the country, there's a lot of old, wealthy, powerful people that made a lot of their money in the Industrial Revolution, maybe made it off, just all kinds of different
Utilities
things.
And things.
But there's a lot of really amazing entrepreneurs that live in Ohio, and just all kinds of really fascinating people. You guys would be surprised. But the other thing that's in Ohio, it was Rickenbacker Air Force Base. And Rickenbacker Air Force Base, and I'm not going to, it was supposedly where
This is a whole other tangent.
Where the whole, where the whole alien research and stuff was done, where all the wrecked craft from the Roswell accident were supposedly stored. But that's a different tangent. We could talk about all the Columbus, Ohio rumors about that on another day. So there was, again, it's funny Julie brings this up. Back in the 80s, there was a guy that worked at Battelle. He was a very well-respected, just everything about him was very well-respected. Professor, doctor, the whole thing. His name is Tommy Thompson.
Battelle is like a scientific research center for people that aren't familiar with that.
Battelle is not only a scientific research center, it's rumored to be, again, tied into the CIA. Again, more homework for you guys. You can Google it yourselves. Battelle Memorial Institute, CIA. So, and it's supposedly not Battelle's private entity. It's not publicly traded, but nobody knows exactly who all their customers are. And essentially, over the years, people just assumed that it was connected with intelligence. True or not, who knows? So Tommy worked there. He worked at Ohio State University. He was very well respected, and he was also known as somewhat of an entrepreneur, something of a character, and he had developed a underwater submarine that could go deeper than anything ever had been able to previously, and be operational for the sake of retrieving things on the bottom of the the ocean. And he could build this technology. This was way before James Cameron, way before all those subs that you guys think you know about from Titanic, way before all that. This Tommy Thompson guy had essentially created technology that would allow, I think they were manned or unmanned subs, I really don't remember.
I think they were unmanned.
So there was this sunken Spanish galleon that was off the coast. I believe it was North Carolina.
I don't
remember. You can GTS it if you want to. Your computer died? Oh. Yeah. So he, GTS stands for Google that shit, by the way, in case you guys want to adopt that.
But it was off the East Coast, somewhere in the South.
I'm pretty sure it was North Carolina, but it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And it was, everyone knew it had gone down. It had been well documented. It wasn't some sort of crazy pirate thing. It was a ship that, if I remember correctly, it's funny I remember all this, that was actually in the process of exporting gold that was from Central America that had been originally the possession of the Incas, that Pizarro, the Spanish explorer, had some sort of stolen it, stored it, and it was getting shipped back or partially shipped back on this galleon that was going back, something like that. It was crazy.
Yeah, that's basically the gist of it.
Yeah, but it was wackadoodle as hell.
I mean, the ship itself had some wacko history. Yeah.
Right. And so the ship, obviously, you guys can guess where I'm going since I talked about subs, sunk. So the ship sinks. People sort of know where it is. It's in this really, obviously deep part of the ocean. It's just, that seems like an oxymoron, doesn't it? It was a shallow part of the ocean.
Can you sink in the shallow part? Not if you're a big ship.
Yeah. Well, so Tommy then, remember earlier I was telling you guys about the YPO people? So there were some other families, and all these people are interconnected through YPO. This is how, again, a lot of the things we're sharing with you now we heard from our YPO friends back when we were taking care of their cars in Columbus, Ohio. So Tommy then goes to a lot of very deep-pocketed people in Columbus and gets money out of them, and they then get a stake in the claim, if there is any to be found.
They were funding his expedition, basically.
Yeah. And so the Wolf family, who owned Columbus Dispatch, you had, I don't know if Wexner was involved, honestly, but I knew there were quite a few YPO families that were involved. There were some, like Ross Labs, I think Stanley Ross had put in money. There were some, on all the people, there was a guy named, who was the guy that started, that made basically hundreds of millions of limited, Swarovski, anyway, I don't remember. Columbus people, Murawski, yeah. That's what was it. I know. So Columbus, Ohio people that are old as us, you might remember all this because it was always talked about in the news when Tommy Thompson, guess what? He goes and finds the gold. He shows proof of the gold. He brings the gold up. Everybody's excited about the gold. The insurance company, everyone, all these sort of legal consternations. It was seen as the greatest discovery forever. But turns out Tommy Thompson doesn't want to give up the gold.
Nope.
So he goes
like Bugs Bunny in the desert. Mine, all mine.
Exactly. So he brings up the gold, and what the hell happens to the gold? Nobody really knows. Yep. And I think some of it actually ended up getting delivered, but my memory goes choppy at this point. All I remember was Tommy ends up in jail.
Yeah.
For telling a federal judge to piss off because he won't give up where the gold is. He might even still be in there now.
I want to say he's still. I think he is.
Yeah, and
It's been a while
he
since I
won't
looked
give
it
up. He won't give up the gold. Everyone knows he pulled gold up and huge amounts of gold. He wouldn't give up. That was the whole end of it. But prior to him going to jail, obviously, because he's not working with us buying a mansion when he's in jail. But so this is back maybe our second or third year in real estate, and Julie and I were selling quite a few houses in this area called Clintonville, Ohio, which was near Ohio State, which was near Battelle. And so I get a call from a gal, and she said, basically what Julie said, we're thinking we want to buy a house, and we aren't really price sensitive, and this was like 2 or 3 years into the business, and Julie and I's average sale price was probably only like 140 grand, and we're going like, oh, what? This doesn't happen to us, right? And then so I'm pre-qualifying. I'm not dumb. This could be a Looney Tunes person, and Clintonville, Ohio, certainly wasn't full of really big ass estates, and they wanted to go outside of Clintonville. There was this area called Rosemary, which if they that's where they really wanted to be, again, for our Columbus, Ohio friends, backing up the Olentangy River and all that. And I went door knocking, actually asking neighbors if they wanted to sell, and nobody wanted to sell.
Yeah, but here's what I remember about that is I remember listening to your prequel, which sounded completely insane. Like, and how will you be funding it? Like gold and like all I remember is you and I were both like, is that for real? That just sounds crazy. And I remember that you called one of our
don't say the name.
I'm not one of our contacts from the car
YPO,
business and from
YPO.
YPO. And she told you, oh, yeah, he's for real. And we're like, really? And I remember going to his museum down in Victorian Village.
And this was before.
And it was incredible.
This was before he was in the news. So we used our YPO connections to check him out. And this gal in particular, who was the wife of somebody in YPO, who was a sweetheart of sweethearts. Anyway, she, we should talk about her. We should talk about how gracious they are. They were for us.
Which is why you called, because
right.
we trusted them.
So she said he's for real. So we ended up showing some of the coolest properties in Columbus, and there were some old, mostly off-market, absolutely insane estates that were made just all the way from the 40s on up.
He basically had no price limitation.
He had no price limitation, right? And they didn't end up buying anything because, well, you know what? Turns out that he was headed for federal prison. But so that was a crazy story. Oh, can I tell another crazy Columbus story?
But what made me think about him was, we were talking about there's no real perfect scenario, right? So I remember everything we showed him, either the house was really awesome, but the land was really boring or sucked, or the land was incredible. Remember the property that had caves on it and waterfalls, but the house needed torn down. And that was in any price range.
Right.
And even with new construction, I remember a deal that we did in Granville, beautiful house, and, did the walk-in inspection. They had forgotten or just hadn't done it to put any insulation in the ceiling. Yeah. That was new construction. There's no perfect scenario. Houses are very complicated scenarios.
Just to frame out how bizarre of a place Columbus, Ohio is, and how deeply rooted some of the wealth is there, and really I think mostly it's political connections, to be honest with you. Ohio used to be one of the most powerful states in the nation for choosing presidents. Matter of fact, the old saying was if you don't win in Ohio, I think people still say you don't win the presidency. Yep. But I think Ohio has the greatest percentages of presidents that actually were born in Ohio. That's true. Taft, and I think there are a whole bunch. So this is where you guys are going to think I'm making it up, but I'm not. Again, we knew this through YPO. Occasionally, you would have Margaret Thatcher, or you'd have other heads of state that would come into Columbus, Ohio, and there would be no fanfare, no news about it, nobody would know about it, and they would fly in just to meet with some of these, dignitary types from Columbus, or these power players that were in Columbus. I'm sure a lot of them were donating money. Mm-hmm. But I remember, I gotta remember if it was Margaret Thatcher. It wasn't the Queen. It had to have been Margaret Thatcher, right?
I think I remember what.
Yeah, this was back in the 90s.
Yeah.
Well, this is when So this was in the 80s, Julie. So it would have been Margaret Thatcher. Yeah. This was in the 80s. We had this car cleaning and detailing business, and we had a customer who had this big estate on Riverside Drive, and his name was Chris. I don't remember his last name. You remember his last name?
Yeah.
Big guy.
Hold on a second.
And this guy,
I want to say Woods.
And here's an interesting story about this guy. He was a teacher, and he had, prior to him becoming a teacher, he had actually worked at different waste disposal plants. And he ends up somehow taking... Yeah, Chris White. Yeah. That's who it was. He ends up taking one of these businesses public and becomes really, really rich. Chris White, and it was, I think he took it public through the NASDAQ. It was Johnson Waste Disposal.
Yep.
Holy crap! How do I remember that?
I don't
This
know.
is good Diet Coke.
Apparently.
This is good stuff. Julie, you realize how many years ago this was?
I can remember the
This is more
pennies
than
that he
this
used to
is
have
more
in
than
his
20.
trunk.
This is more than 25. No, you're thinking of a different guy.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right.
Yep. That
We had a
was
lot of
Jay. That
clients,
was
didn't
Jay
we?
something who had that
Yeah,
Rolls
yeah, I
Royce,
remember.
and he ran that illegal gambling business. We can tell that story next if you want to. Well, so who was I talking about? Oh yeah, so Chris White ended up buying this big estate on Riverside Drive. It was wonderful. He was a really, really nice guy. He was new money, and so he was kind of, awkward with the things he was buying. It was just kind of funny for me to show up occasionally and pick up some of his cars, and because we had this cleaning facility and we had 3 guys working for us. I'd pick up the cars, meet the customers, meet and greet, and that sort of thing. Anyway, so Chris calls me, and he never calls me. It was always through a secretary, and this was a panic call. Chris calls me, Tim, you got to clean our green Jaguar. Green Jaguar. Yes, I knew he had one. He bought it for his wife as a present. You got to come out, you got to pick it up, you got to clean it, and I need this done urgently. And he never acted like that. Now, of course, he's a customer, so whatever. So I went and did it. I picked it up, and then I, got it back. It looked beautiful, British Racing green, biscuit interior, and so he wasn't there when I dropped it off, but his wife was, and I said, I hope everything's okay. Like, this is unusual. He's a very mellow guy, and she said, well, this is a secret, and you can't tell anybody, but. I think it was actually at Wexner's estate. I'm pretty sure it was.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah. Margaret Thatcher, and this was when his estate was in Bexley, is having a private, cocktail party or whatever at, Wexner's estate, and we were invited, and we wanted to drive our Jaguar because it was British.
Makes sense. What the hell? I know. Like, what? Okay.
I thought that was funny. Gosh, what was the other story you were about to tell?
Just about how.
No, what was the other name? You mentioned a name.
Jay.
Yeah.
I can't remember his
Let's
last
not
name.
mention his last name.
That
didn't end well.
Yeah.
Yeah. So another car cleaning and detailing story. And this guy, these all happened to us when Julie and I were in college, by the way, basically. So this guy had 2 Rolls Royces, and he had some other normal car. And he had this big gated estate that was in this area called Deer Creek in Powell, Ohio.
Yeah.
So if you guys hear that horrible
In the
music, it's
retreat.
because we're outside. Yeah, it was in the retreat. It was on Deer
His
Creek.
street was Deer Creek.
Yeah. So
I remember his estate because I remember seeing the most giant mosquitoes I'd ever seen in my life because it was along the river.
Yeah.
But it was beautiful. But I do remember that. That's funny.
Most of these customers we'd see every 6 months. He had us come out every quarter. So it was great. And we had a lot of their customers, cleaning customers. And which, by the way, not in case you guys are thinking a lot of those became real estate clients after we got into real estate. I think only maybe 2 or 3 of them did.
Not a lot.
Yeah.
Most of them, I think, probably stayed in. Those
They
were
weren't moving.
Big-ass houses.
Yeah.
They were staying there a while.
They were, here's the thing. All those people we're talking about now were probably our age,
I know.
plus or
I think
minus,
about that
when
all
we
the
were
time.
working for them. Isn't that funny to think about?
I know.
Every name I've mentioned so far, when we were working for them, were our age.
Yep. You're right.
Does that make you feel old or young?
It makes me feel appreciative that we had that kind of influence when I think about people that don't have that kind of exposure to
Yeah, I know. We were
people
lucky.
who are wealthy but also nice.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a really, and let's flip around and talk about Ian Rosselli after this.
Yeah.
So this guy, his name was Jay, and he had 2 Rolls Royces, and one of them was a vintage car in the 60s, and the other was essentially brand new. And this is brand new, like you guys would picture from Miami Vice brand news, not like the brand new one you see nowadays, so old brand new. But I think, you know what, now I think about it, I think he actually had a third one too. Anyway, you can't just buy one. So his Rolls Royces have this really crazy mineral, the suspension on Rolls Royces is fluid. You guys have heard probably of air suspension and whatnot. Well, Citroens and old Rolls Royces use this mineral oil system where essentially if there was compression on one part of the suspension, the mineral oil would run through, obviously tubes and basically allow that part of the suspension not to essentially compress or overly compress. And by doing it, you created hypothetically a really good ride, but the fact is those systems always leaked and it was almost impossible to fix them. And you could only buy that stupid mineral oil from Rolls Royce and it costs was more expensive than caviar.
You're not getting it at the gas station.
Exactly. But so the only reason I know that is because I used to take his
I
used to take his Rolls Royce to a place that would service it. And I remember talking to the mechanic and he told me like a pint of that crap that he had. The mineral oil was like $200 or
Yeah.
something. Well, so his suspension in the back was always clapped out, so he was always ruining suspension. Like the thing would run low in the back, and he never told me why. I never asked. He wasn't one for long conversations, and it was just like, "How's it going? Whatever. Tell me when you're done." And we'd pick the car up, drop the car off, you'd pay us. Always in cash too, which is was a really nice benefit, and always in small denominations, or sometimes, believe it or not, guys, in change. And our average service was about $150 per car. And again, Rolls-Royce, new Rolls-Royce, I never took care of. Suspension was always clapped out in the back. Until one day, he asked me to take care of it. Great. Another car we can take care of for him. He's a great customer. And then it came time for me helping him unload what was in the trunk. And what was always in the trunk. And so he opens the trunk, and you guys think I'm going to say a body, don't you?
That's what I always
You
thought
think
you
I'm
were
going to say a
say.
body.
I know.
Well, I am. There was 5 bodies. No, I'm
No.
kidding. It was change. It was coins. He had bags
Tons
and
of coins.
bags and bags of coins. And the coins all had words written on them that were lodges, like, how do I explain what a lodge is? Like a private club. They're
Yeah.
legal, and he had, well, can you remember a name of a
I can't
lodge?
remember. I just
Elks
remember the coins.
Lodge
Yeah.
and weird things like that. I wonder if those even exist
I don't
anymore.
know. I think they do.
Yeah. So he had, it turns out, Jay was second or third generation one-armed bandit gambling money. Let me explain it. Okay, so in Ohio, and I think actually Ohio is legal, gambling is legal
I think
now
on
on
the
the
Ohio
river or
River.
whatnot.
Yeah.
But evidently there was a carve-out in the law that made it so that you could have these one-armed bandit gambling machines in private, like clubs, like lodges and whatnot. Now, again, who the hell knows
Because
about that?
it's not a casino, I guess. It's
Yeah,
just
because
a lodge.
and so he and his family, for essentially all of Ohio. I don't think they had the Cleveland section now that I'm remembering it, but I think all of Ohio, maybe into another state, every single lodge that was there, they had these one-armed bandit gambling machines, and he would literally occasionally go and he would pick up the money himself, the ones I assume that were the closest, and they had made who knows how much millions, and it was all perfectly legal.
Crazy.
And so that was like a lesson, and they were always nice, like I said, and all these customers were really nice. One of his other neighbors was another guy, actually, ironically named Jay Blotnick. He passed away recently. Yeah. He was one of our favorite
They're
people
great.
ever. Fantastic guy.
I was for their kids.
Yeah.
I remember that.
And then, so what was the
Super
other
nice.
story we were going to tell? Oh, let's talk about.
And
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, you guys have a good splash of color as what we did in our formidable years prior to getting into real estate, because we didn't have any money. We didn't have anybody writing checks for our college education. We didn't want to borrow any money for college. And so this car cleaning and detailing business, and through the fact that we were willing to work hard and the fact that these people came to trust us, really flourished. The car cleaning and detailing business in the 80s, when I was probably 18, 19, somewhere in there, was making over $100,000 a year. Maybe I was 20 when it got up to that point. And Julie and I went to a professor. It was actually a TA, an English TA at Ohio State. And because the detailing business was obviously taking off, and we had no limit to how much we could have easily expanded it. Actually, it's funny, the next family you're about to talk about is the family that told us to get into real estate. Right? Okay.
I think so.
And we could have easily expanded it. And so we went to this TA, and we told him, because we liked him, and he was trustworthy, we thought. And we said, well, this is what's going on. And he was like listening, like blah, 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 not making eye contact. And he goes, well, how much money is this business making? And we told him, and he like practically peed himself. And he goes, what the hell are you doing in college if you're making that much money in your car cleaning and detailing business? True story. And it wasn't long thereafter that Julie and I both dropped out. We didn't graduate from college. And it's because our detailing business took off. And that business, through the experience we had, then basically translated directly into real estate. Because the detailing business, we had to learn how to run a business. We had to learn how to take care of customers. We had to learn how to be worthy of being trusted with some incredibly important assets. We had people that would essentially have us, they would pay us like $10,000, $12,000 in the middle of the winter to go over to their private aircraft hangar at the airport, and it's called Millionaire, ironically enough, and take care of their private jets. And some of these jets were worth tens of millions of dollars. And these are we were really exclusive, hard to get relationships. And that taught us essentially how to really be drilled down. But what it really did is it busted our bubbles on rich people, because me more than Julie. Julie, I think in retrospect, you'll admit that you grew up in what was probably more of a left-leaning family than mine.
I guess.
Well, your parents
I
were
don't know.
both teachers; they couldn't
Yeah,
help themselves.
I know, middle of the road.
Yeah, but practically,
Moderate.
practically communists.
I can unplug you, you know.
Well, at home, when they're at home, they used to wear these little Fidel Castro.
Oh yeah, whatever. Give me a break.
Anyway, so I grew up.
Diet Coke.
I think I could safely say that I grew up on the bottom of the middle class, so lower middle
You're trying
class.
to say is the wrong side of the tracks.
On the
which is
wrong
very
side of the
clear to our listeners by now.
On the wrong side of the tracks, and then probably mostly on, I would say, the upper poor class, if there is such a thing,
Yeah.
right? I mean, I'd say that's where I was on the financial spectrum, where my parents were, and I was just riding shotgun to them.
Yeah.
So we had all these preconceived notions through no fault of our own, of believing that it's like essentially has become normalized in society, that rich people, I mean, you can just fill in the blank with all your gross adjectives, or evil, or take from other people.
Well, I mean, and if we're being honest, in our early childhood, our only exposure to, quote, rich people in our minds were the kids that lived in Worthington Hills, who we all hated because
I didn't have that
supposedly
experience.
had big houses.
You grew up around those kids. I didn't.
Yeah, but that's and that was like, I don't know. If you use your real estate brain, houses might have been $50,000 more than.
I didn't know I was poor until I went to middle
I
school,
didn't either until
and I
middle
was
school.
around rich,
That's right.
spoiled assholes like you.
Yeah. Well, see, spoiled assholes like me had another rung above us, who we hated because they lived up there.
Yeah, well, I discovered that too. It was
Yeah.
it was an awakening year, seventh
Yeah.
grade. It was awful.
7th grade. I hated 7th grade too.
Yeah. Well, so what were we talking about? Oh, I remember. So we had all these preconceived notions about rich kids.
About
and it was societal and movies and books and the whole thing. And I remember specifically, it's probably because my name is Tim. I always used to have this Tiny Tim thing with the
yeah.
what was the evil
Charles
rich
Dickens.
guy? Charles Dixon. What's his name?
I don't remember.
Yeah, so that was my exposure to rich people. Rich people were
Very
evil.
little.
Rich people had no feelings. Rich people were just basically, they got their money on the backs of A Christmas Carol.
Yes.
They got their money on the backs of poor Tiny Tim. Tiny Tim was going to die because he couldn't get this operation that, whatever.
parents
Okay,
couldn't
so
afford it.
that's really how deeply rooted my beliefs were about rich people, until we started knowing some of them, and not all of them were really rich. Some of them were, I'm sure, working wealthy, but some of them were really rich. And what we discovered quickly is all of our preconceived notions about rich people, were completely wrong. There was not a single exception to that. And that was such an amazing awakening thing, because we were super scared. I remember back when we were teenagers and like 20 and 21, and Julie and I both looked like we were 12, and we were, we would go out, and this was when we were in high school, listeners. Julie and I met in high school. She was 16, I was 17. And we started dating. She followed me around like a lost dog. She couldn't.
Right.
All she wanted to do
I
is
felt
know
sorry
my
for you.
name. It was ridiculous. It was full on hero worship.
Is this podcast called Revisionist History, or is this our podcast?
Actually, Malcolm Gladwell's podcast is called Revisionist History. All right,
You
so
could star on it.
wow,
Based on the thing.
your memory's completely different than mine.
Yeah.
I think I had better Diet
obviously.
Coke than you.
Yeah.
So we met in high school, and we when we were I was probably a junior and she was a sophomore or maybe senior, and right in that whole time era, I think she and I were pretty much a matched pair, and we're in agreement that we were just going to be together forever. And my dad made for us a really cool, like a little 3x6 or 3x5 card, and helped us name the car cleaning and detailing business. We called it the Executive Service. And it was just a one card, and there was writing on, I think, only one side. And what she and I would do, no matter how cold it was or what the weather was, when all of our friends were out getting laid and getting stoned, and that is what they were doing. It was the 80s, right? That's what you did. Julie and I would go out to these restaurants in Columbus, and restaurants primarily because the parking lots were, generally speaking, not behind a wall. and we would put these invitation cards. We called it flyering, and we'd put these invitation cards on only the nice cars in the parking lot.
That's how I learned my cars. That's the only reason I know cars.
So we'd go to this parking lot of this usually very nice restaurant, and we would go and put these invitation cards only on, and we wouldn't put it on the windshield because no one would get it. Because it was a card, it was a large card. It was thick enough but not too thick. We could actually put it on the driver's door in the window gasket, and so you couldn't miss it. And that's how we built our business originally. And so that's exactly how we ended up having YEO business too, or YPO business, because we ended up flyering one of them.
Well, it's the equivalent of door hangering for real estate.
Or door knocking, really. But we were targeted. We were smart enough not just to flyer every car. Because, and here's our logic. We knew that if we got a customer with a new $60,000 560 SL Mercedes, that there is zero chance he didn't at least have one other Mercedes. That's just how you did it.
Theoretically, they would be paying the bill.
Right. Or if they were married,
and repeat clients.
They were married, then they'd maybe have the whole thing, and that's what it was. And we had a lot of doctors, a lot of business people, a lot of executives, a lot of everybody, and then they would of course pass our names around, and then we'd pick up more and more customers. And I told you guys what ended up happening with that little executive service business. We just learned so much from that experience. One of the customers we eventually picked up, there was this guy in town, and he was mythical, to me at least, and his name was Jack Rosselli. And Jack Rosselli became somewhat famous. He was third or maybe fourth generation of L. Jack Rosselli. So like his son, he named, remember it was L. Jack Rosselli. So it stands for Louis Jack Rosselli. So they would exchange first names depending on generation. So like Jack Rosselli, who I'm telling you about, like I said, he was either the third or fourth. His dad's name was Louis. His granddad's name was Jack. And so his son's name was Louis. You guys following me on all this? So it was actually really cool. And his family was so nice. But what he was really famous for, at least in my little nerdy preteen mind, was he had a big, guess what, car collection. And he had been all over the Columbus Dispatch because he had a super rare Ferrari 250 long wheelbase California. Not that I remember.
Yeah.
And he bought this car out of, I think it was Venezuela. And the car had become famous because during its restoration, they found bullet holes that had been reupholstered over in the seat shells, because while the king of Venezuela or some God knows what was driving it, there was a suicide attempt. He had this really great car collection. He was essentially in Columbus, like Columbus aristocracy. He was one of the ones that I made a list every year of car cleaning and detailing customers that I wanted to attract. And he was definitely always on the list. Wexner was on the list. Eventually, we ended up getting all of them. But he, finally, we get a shot at his business, and somebody like that, because he has a big car collection, he definitely knows about everything about cars. He knows about what you're doing. He knows, like, are you supposed to be doing this? Are you supposed to be doing that? He knew what Connolly leather was. He just knew he was a consummate professional and an avid car collector. And so we ended up earning his business. And they always had cool cars, as you can imagine. Now, the car garage or storage facility where he kept all the collector cars, we didn't go in there too often. We took care of his drivers, and he always had a new Mercedes, or his wife had a new 7 Series BMW, and they had usually a Ferrari that they had, things like that. And then occasionally he'd let me work on one of his collector cars. Again, another name you guys should research because he's a fascinating guy. Last time we saw him was actually at a car auction in California. Yeah. So that was that was probably 8 or 9 years ago.
No, was Zoe?
We just ran into him.
It was like 4 years ago.
I remember, I'll tell you guys a funny story. So he obviously remembered us as the people that took care of his cars. And he was always very nice to us. But I was so thrilled to be able to tell him, this was in my 40s, remember, that Julie and I had started buying Ferraris.
Yeah, well, I mean, he had a significant impact.
Couldn't believe it. He thought I was joking.
I know. Well, I mean, he probably remembered us as the detailing kids. But,
yeah, I know.
But he had a very significant influence, and so did
his
wife,
definitely. Well, because he's such a classy guy, he was
I
so
found him
well
to be
dressed.
very intimidating back then.
Oh, he wasn't. He was scary as hell.
He was a quiet talker, very reserved, and
he was
he
was like the Godfather from the original Godfather.
Yes.
The Marlon Brando character.
Yeah.
That's who he was like. But he wasn't
better looking, I think.
But he was tall, and he is great looking, dressed impeccably.
Yeah.
Well, so his wife's name is Anne, and Anne was one of the nicest, sweetest, just maternal characters in our entire lives. This took a long time to really earn our way into their lives. They got to the point where when they would go out of town, I'll tell you a side story. So he ends up selling this huge car collection to a very rich Chinese family
I was going to bring that
in
up.
Macau,
Yeah.
in China, the island of Macau or something,
Yeah.
which essentially has become, I think, the number one destination for gambling in the world. Well, the family that was associated, okay, you want to hear a crazy loop?
Mm-hmm.
All right, the family that was associated, or one of the billionaire families that was associated with the development of that whole gambling mecca over in China, wherever it is, they ended up buying his whole car collection. So he and his wife, Ann, fly there to meet whoever it was, and they were signing off on the deal to buy all these cars worth who knows how much, tens of millions at least. Well, so his cars now are largely over on display in some private museum over in some basement of some casino in China or something crazy.
So weird.
All right, so here's where the weird part is. And let me make sure I go back and talk about Ann. Okay. So that one of the families that formed that entire gambling mecca that I just described is the same. I talked about this on the podcast last week. Remember, I was telling you the story about one of our customers in Greenwich, Rob Johnson. Okay, Rob Johnson's the number one agent in Connecticut, number one agent in Greenwich. He's been a long-time coaching client. So he is in. He gets this call from a manservant, basically named Bobby, who's this British what is it? MI6 guy. And anyway, Bobby works for this Chinese dissident who is living on a massive 200-foot plus yacht off the East Coast because he's afraid of the Chinese government and he's afraid of COVID. Okay, so this guy's living on this yacht and he's looking for this estate. And he, I talked about this on the podcast last week. This just happened 2 weeks ago, by the way. Well, this is what I didn't tell you, Julie. That guy, because I wrote down the name after Rob told me and I wanted to research him. So that guy is not only on the outs big time with the Chinese government, but that guy's extended family was one of the families that started the Macau casinos.
That's twisted.
Isn't that a crazy loop?
It was a crazy loop.
Did you follow me on that one?
That was a long path.
That was a long path.
Wow.
I know.
But you know what, and I do want to go back and talk about Ann a little bit, but all of these memories and these stories and experiences that we had, that was really our original center of influence expansion lesson. Though at the time, we absolutely had no idea how a lot of that stuff was working. And it just goes to show, you follow those breadcrumbs, you never know. Like the story we were talking about Tommy Thompson. Most agents, had they heard his story,
well, it's his
on
girlfriend,
the first,
Julie.
it was actually his girlfriend.
And she was a nurse.
Which was even worse, right? I mean, that's like 10 times removed what was actually going on.
But we pre-qualified.
Most people would have been like, that's crazy, and just hung up and wouldn't have checked the story, wouldn't have done the research, wouldn't have connected the dots.
Do you remember when we got the call from the gal who was embarrassed to ask her help her sell? It was either a little duck blind house in Roslyn or it was a mobile home or something.
I use that story in coaching all the time.
Tell it.
Okay, well, do you want to talk about Ann first so we can close that loop? Okay. Well, so oftentimes on coaching calls, when we're playing, I play this game on coaching calls called Show Me the Money, right? I want to know what you're doing in the next 30 days, 90 days, whatever, okay? And
Julie channeling her inner Jerry Maguire, evidently.
Well, but the reason that we do that is because so many agents are like, okay, let's do a new spoke, let's do new lead generation, let me try this widget or wadget or whatever. And before I ever allow that to happen, we look at what's right in front of you is the point, okay? And so this conversation usually comes up when the coaching client will say, oh yeah, there's this other deal, but I didn't really pursue it because the house is so ugly, or it's too cheap, or it's like 5 minutes outside of my normal area. You got some excuse why you're not going after it, right? And so after we do that and we add up all of the crap that you're forgetting about, I tell this story about what we lovingly call the duck blind on Roslyn, where we got a call. Here's how I remember it. You can add some color, but it was a for sale by owner actually originally, and the lady that owned it was a teacher, and this was literally a house that had zero going for it. On top of that, it was in the floodplain. It was built out of cinder block, which for what people...
You couldn't get insurance on it. You couldn't get a mortgage on it. It had to be all cash buyer. Because when the river flooded, it was made out of cinder block, and the locals called it a duck blind because guess what happened to the house? It became, underwater.
That's really the best use for it.
And continuously. So it always looked nice and clean on the inside because everything had just basically been replaced, 2 days earlier.
Yeah. So had very little going for it, but we were FSBO hunters, and she was nice, and she needed our help. Well, the way I remember this is that, of course, I think we ended up selling it to our own buyer, who then put stucco on the outside and made it decent.
You know what? You're confusing stories. I know what you're talking about. That's a different story.
Okay, maybe it was a different ugly house.
That guy ends up going to jail, by the way.
Oh, see,
that's a different story. The guy that stuck at it goes to jail. No, the story is that she had a mobile home that somehow she had inherited or something. She lived in Clintonville.
Yeah.
She was, again, like, I need to sell this. It's like something I inherited. Right.
Yeah.
And then... and she said, I'd called like 10 realtors and nobody wants to list it. Yep. It was one of these stories. So we ended up listing it. We ended up selling it right away. We had hardly sold any mobile homes.
But she gave us some kick-ass
But here's what happened. She turns out that she was the secretary for, now are you remembering?
Yeah, the clerk.
Now I'll even remember who.
Okay.
She was the secretary for an executive, if not the CEO, of Mettler Toledo.
Okay.
And Mettler Toledo was in the process of hiring in new executives. And then she ends up basically getting us a relationship with Mettler Toledo, and they then basically give us all their relocating executive business, and that ended up serving, and they were all buying expensive houses, and that lasted for our entire careers.
Years.
And so that goes to the point of basically always say yes.
Always say yes. I mean, and we have lots of stories like that where if you just take something on face value and you don't do
especially a listing,
what you say, drill down and ask good questions. I mean, related to this is what I call the dirt call. When the builder Truco, I got this
Matt
wacko.
Truco.
I had this crazy sounding voicemail. This is Matt. I've got some fill dirt. I can drop it off on your lot over there on whatever that listing was.
And you bring it to me on a piece of paper, this note, and
like,
you say, Tim, you can't believe this jackass has just called. And a matter of fact, I think I remember this is in New Albany.
Yeah.
And I think you ended up having me even listening to the recording, and I go, and then I caught something. He said something. He mentioned a street or something in his heavily drawn voice. He says something. I was like, ooh, and so I called him back, and get this, listeners, true story. So he has this big, huge pile of dirt because he just dug a basement for a house that he was going to put for sale that was going to be listed with New Albany Realty, and this property was like $1.8 million or something. So I call him and I say, hell yeah, we'll take the dirt, because we knew another builder that wanted the dirt because he needed to level up. He needed to build up a property. And so we did,
it's all the same
we help people, in all the same. So we helped a dirt deal get done. And so we then start talking to Matt, and Matt buys this lot. I even remember the realtor's name, but I won't mention it.
Yep.
So he buys this lot from this agent. He's now building this house, and he's basically, I was asking about, right? I'm asking about the property. I'm curious about it. It's not for sale. Who knows, right? And I want to know more about him. And he's not only got that lot that he's purchased, but also 2 or 3 others. And he had specs on the other end of town in Powell. And so he starts telling me about the property and asking why I didn't know about it. And I told him, well, it's not, no one's told me about it. And he walks me kind of through the blueprints and everything. Long story short, he didn't even have an active listing with this other agent. And this other agent had completely neglected him, hadn't even been following up, hadn't been doing jack. So Matt ends up listing that spec, which we end up selling. He then lists the next 2 specs, which we end up selling. I think maybe one we double-ended. Then he lists his other expensive specs that are out on the other side of town, one of which end up being bought by, guess what, one of the relocating executives at Mettler Toledo. And this guy chose that house. We'd given him a bunch of listings in the area that he wanted to live because of a description that Julie wrote, because the problem with this house is it had a really steep driveway. Do you remember this?
I do remember that.
You remember?
I remember.
So it had a really steep driveway.
It was a great house, but it had a crazy looking driveway.
Yeah, it was like an Olympic ski run, basically.
It was like Dismemberment Gorge ski trail.
And remember, we lived where it snowed, so how the hell are you going to get up and down that driveway? And so Julie wrote this beautiful description describing how it's like I don't even know, French Alps, or I don't even know what, this long, beautiful soliloquy about, And so he ends up, of all the listings we sent him, he ends up choosing that one to see, and he buys it. And if I remember correctly, look, that's the whole story. But again, this goes to the whole concept of chasing every single lead down and asking the tough questions. And
not assuming that just because, and I hear this from agents a lot when we talk about even new construction, they've got a previous relationship. Well, that doesn't mean that it's, they're going to continue that relationship. Remember the expireds on Eastman Court, like the big name realtor.
Well, do you remember what Matt Truco, he ends up listing a 73-unit condo complex with us.
I know,
We
because I had
had
a lot of fun entering all of those in the MLS in one
yeah,
day.
but we ended up having we were carrying 130
It was awesome.
or something like that active listings then.
Yeah, because of the dirt call being taken seriously.
Right. And I sometimes when I talk to agents and they're like so prideful that they've delegated the pre-qualifying pre-falling.
What are you losing?
Like, what the hell are you doing?
That's one of the
You
last
never
things.
delegate your
Yeah.
pre-qual buyer. I don't want to talk to buyers. Well, then you're going to lose probably an opportunity at probably 50% listing opportunities because most of those buyers have houses to sell. Well, my trained up staff will ask the right questions.
Yeah.
The hell they
You
will.
think they do.
They don't.
You think they do.
They absolutely won't.
That's assuming they make the call at all.
Right. I mean, we had to hire some sales assistants then, and I remember basically we wrote scripts and procedures for the sales assistants, but as soon as the sales assistants, you guys call them buyer's agents, as soon as they had enough money coming in that they had financial security for the month, maybe the following month, maybe the month after that, and the number was usually around $7,000. As soon as they had $7,000 pending, you could give them a completely easy lead, and they would not sell it to them. They'd just screw up.
Because they were at their own capacity.
They were it. That were done. And that's ultimately what you're going to be dealing with when you're starting to staff up. Anyway, so back to Ann Rosselli.
Yes.
How did we even get there?
Well, I don't know. We were talking about YPO and Tommy Thompson and stuff like that. So you remember, because here's the scar I still have to prove it. We used to dog sit, parrot sit, house sit.
He had a parrot. Actually, I didn't end up
And
parrot
Enzo.
sitting because the parrot was so mean.
That's right.
Jack
we decided to opt out of that one.
Well, so we asked Ann once. We said we are thinking about building our detailing business, and we want to ask Jack if he wants to invest. He'd been a longtime client then, very loyal, sent us other people. We could name drop.
Well, and he was in real estate too.
Yeah, and he was a big, huge commercial investor guy. And so, we would, you'd name drop Jack's name anywhere, and people would, that pre-qual done, here's the keys to my, wherever the hell it was. It wouldn't matter.
Awesome.
He was that well respected. So I asked Ann, we want to talk with him about possibly helping us, the detailing business is this, the other thing. And she goes, well, let me see if I can set it up. A week or two later, we get invited out to see him. And this guy was definitely, and is definitely, I'm sure, still very intimidating. It's just his mannerisms.
I remember that meeting.
And so, right, I think it was on the weekend, wasn't it? It was like Saturday morning. And so he calls us out, and he has this, what can only be described as a beautiful, I mean, come on now, right? Put the pieces together. The back of his property was gorgeous. And he had this big, huge terraced area, and we knock on the door. Ann says he's around back. We go through a gate. We walk through the gate, and he is sitting, a good distance off. But what you see is this very good-looking Italian man wearing a silk robe with this mean fucking parrot that just wanted to kill us, named Enzo. And so this bird basically would never leave Jack's side, and he kind of kept it on its perch.
Not
It was near
at all.
Yeah, and then when they would travel, well, at least when they went to Macau that one time, they asked us to watch the bird, and I was like, "There's no way we're watching that bird. That bird will kill us." But we ended up watching their dog. This is when we were there in China. So anyway, so we walked up to, we slowly walked up to Jack. His back was behind us, and we sat down, and he was very quiet, and he'd listen to what we had to say, and very charming, just always just again, a really, really good role model for us and how to behave. And we asked him, this is what we're thinking about doing. This is the numbers. This is the other thing. He asked us some few good questions. And then he said, he sat back and he leaned, and he I'm sure we were very, as polished as we could have been. And he said this, he didn't want to invest. He didn't say it. He didn't want to invest. He said, I want you to think about this. He said, don't make your hobby your business, is what he said.
I remember that.
Yep. Don't make your hobby your business. He said, when you make your hobby your business, not only are you going to probably have a bad business, you're going to ruin your hobby. And then I think he then suggested that we actually think about getting into real estate. Mm-hmm. I think that's what he did.
Yeah, and that was important for me to hear too, because I'm a musician and had been going to music school, and that same mantra of don't make your hobby your business, that applied to both of us actually. And let me tell a quick story about Muffy the dog.
Sure.
Okay,
Muffy was their dog.
So the scar on my foot, I remember we said no to the parrot, but we'll take care of Muffy the dog. Muffy was this little
sweet dog,
fluff ball Maltese, right?
Yeah.
And at the time we were living in a little condo on Plant Drive that didn't really have an enclosed backyard. But Muffy had been going out doing her business, going out 3 or 4 feet, until one morning when it was a lovely 40 degrees and half frozen snow, mud, just a typical nasty February day in Ohio. She takes off running out the back door, like running, okay? And this is like Jack Russilli's wife's dog.
Yeah.
For the love of God. It's not like I can just wait for it to come back. I got to go after this thing. So I'm wearing like a t-shirt nightgown, okay? And I think I had socks on, underwear, socks, nightgown. And it's 40 degrees, but I have to go. So I take off running after this dog. And I remember Muffy thought it was hilarious to act like she's slowing down. I get close, kind of like what Max does now, and then take off. Well, this was in a sea of
kind of like what Zoe does now.
And Zoe too, yes. Like they're all the same brain. This was in a sea of identical, just hundreds of condos that all looked the same over in Worthington Woods. And I remember running and running and running. And it's like a half an hour, and I am so far away from our place, but I've got to get this damn dog. And so finally, in an act of desperation, now so in the process, I'm chasing after her. I slide on somebody's front porch, and I've got a bloody gash in my knee, okay, and on the top of my foot, okay. So now I'm muddy, covered in rain, sleet, no shoes on, and bleeding.
And barely dressed.
And barely dressed. So I clearly look like an escaped asylum person, And so...
Well, we got to tell the asylum story after this, how we used to get calls from the asylum. All right, we'll tell that story next.
So finally, in an act of desperation, somewhere I had seen on TV, dog trainers would curl up in a little ball and start whining like a baby dog, so like Zoe does now. So I get into this pine tree in the snow and mud, bleeding. Now I'm curled up, acting like a little baby dog. And Muffy comes right over, and I grab her, and I'm like, you will not get away from me this time. And I remember holding on, and she was filthy and disgusting too. I hold her by her fur, and I'm like, then I look around, and I have no freaking clue what street I'm even on. Because remember, that subdivision was everywhere. There were thousands of these freaking condos. And so finally, I'm tracing back the numbers.
What was that movie we just watched where all the houses were green on Netflix?
It was exactly like that. Yeah. That's right. I can't remember the name of that now.
We just watched it 2 nights ago.
That was a crazy movie.
Start with the C.
It'll come to me in a second. So finally, I find my way back, and Muffy is saved. But that's why I have that scar, is because of that damn dog.
Yeah. Well, so Ann Russelli.
At least it wasn't a parrot taking off, I guess.
She got to, she knew when college tuition was due, and be careful. Yep. She knew when college tuition was due, and she, because we were going to Ohio State at the time, and obviously, what she would do. Just checking my technology. Sorry about that, listeners. So. She would, we'd, drop off her BMW or whatever it was, and she would then, pay us. And she would always pay us in cash. And she wouldn't, the amount was $125 or $150. And she would never count it. She would just grab whatever was in her wallet and just give it to us. And, she would really do this around Christmas. And we would always... It's $150. I know, it's fine. Goodbye, get out of my house, kind of thing, right?
A couple times you even said that Jack had already paid us.
That's where I'm getting to. So she then, she overpays us. And this was actually around Christmas. I think it was fall, or I don't remember what. It was around Christmas, and it was tuition was due. Mm-hmm. So same routine. She gives us a big wad of cash, and it was like $2,000. And then Jack comes home. And I was just, basically getting ready to leave. And he then pays us for the same job. And I said, Jack, your wife's already pays us. And he goes, Tim, I know. He said, he knows. Take care of us. He knows, he knew. And this has been something that, they had done for all these years that helped us to basically stop borrowing money to pay for Ohio State, which we shouldn't have done in the first place. But so... Yeah, they were intentionally double paying us. Yep. And I remember actually one of the times when she'd done it the first time, I actually kept the overpayment and I tried to give it back to her and she wouldn't take it back. Yeah. And that's when I realized that she was doing it intentionally.
Yeah, very, very, very classy.
Yeah.
Subtle and classy people.
And she would always there would be occasional customers, new customers that we would get that would be, we'd assume in that same social circle, and we would ask her if they're legit, because some of them would have us, there was a guy that had 3 Lamborghinis and just all this other stuff, and we would call her and we'd say, what's the story? And she never really said anything. She wasn't gossipy. She'd just say yay or nay, basically.
Yep.
And, so there was a lot of stories like that. But that example, I think Julie and I will never forget because we modeled that behavior for ourselves. And we that's how we act. And we learn from those experiences that all the preconceived notions that apparently our parents and the people around us in our little, middle class, lower middle class world had about rich people were completely wrong. And there was never a single exception to that experience to all the customers we had in that business. Never one. What was the story you're about to tell? Oh, so we get into real estate, and it was probably the second or third year in real estate, and we started doing just listed, just sold cards, which, by the way, we learned, and we tell you guys in the coaching program, don't mail the just listed, always just mail the just sold.
Yeah.
And so we were selling a lot of houses that were in the same area where there was this place called Harding Hospital.
Yes, a mental institution.
A mental institution.
It had been there a long time. I think it's named after President Harding.
It was.
Yeah, and so we had this really great.
But it wasn't a drug and alcohol rehab.
No,
I don't
was,
even think they have mental institutions, state-run mental institutions.
I don't think so.
No, this one was private.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah.
Well, so we had this great title girl. I can't remember her name now.
No, you're getting ahead of the story.
Well, you tell it then, because
Yeah.
I have maybe a different version of it. But that's okay.
No, but her story, she was joking, and what I'm telling you now actually really did happen. So we would always get the strangest ass calls, and it would be literally like you were talking to crazy people.
Because our cards went everywhere. It's not like we selected certain houses.
Right, and we didn't realize that the cards were going to Harding Hospital. So we were getting not only neighborhoods that were covered in the cards, but also every time we mailed to this particular area, which we were frequently because we had a lot of customers there, we were basically soliciting people that were in mental institutions. And evidently these would go to people who lived in mental institutions because the way it was listed in the service we were using to mail the postcards, the people in the mental institution each had their own address so they could receive mail. And so it made it into this mail list that, those are private addresses. So whatever. And the system wasn't that technically sophisticated, so you couldn't remove apartments or whatever. I don't remember the whole thing. Anyway, so we'd get these crazy-ass calls from people, and then it would happen every time we mail these postcards. And some of these calls were just, and we just got to the point where, and we were new in business, that we didn't know that was abnormal.
I know. Well, all I was remembering is that there was enough of it. Somehow our title gal was involved, and she's like, do you guys have like a poster up over there at that mental institution? Because you sure have some crazy clients.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, was it an actual crazy client, or were they just acting poorly because they're pending?
But, I mean, these are the experiences you have.
You just can't make this stuff up,
But it all goes back to the same thing. You just always have to be, saying yes. And on the other, there's nothing really on the other side of no. There's no good things on the other side of no.
No, I always tell them in Premier Coaching, if something is pretty far out of your wheelhouse, maybe you've never done a commercial deal before, you can partner with a commercial agent, you can refer it and make a referral fee, but don't just not return the call because it sounds crazy, like the dirt call. Dig a little deeper and see, and the deal that you do might not even be with that person. Maybe it's a referral, or they remember you were nice to them. We used to get tons of open house people calling us back, and they mostly in the first time buyer crowd that would say, you know what, you guys were the only ones who gave us the time of day. It was 2 years ago and we weren't ready yet.
Yep. And it is interesting though that from the detailing business, I wonder when our first year, like we didn't really have to heavily solicit. We would solicit mail call our car cleaning detailing customers, but like Julie said, they wouldn't actually transact that frequently. And they probably had their own, agent that they'd known forever, and maybe asking
the family
and asking the people who are their car cleaning and detailing, kids just a couple years before to sell their, multi-million-dollar estate was maybe a bridge too far for some of them. But a lot of them did do real estate transactions with us.
Eventually,
some of our original
they referred people.
Yep, some of our original deals were just from that. But where'd that come from? If you just trace all that back, the original, what was the seed? It was going out every single freaking weekend when it was cold and it was raining, when you and I were kids, and we were flyering cars, and we were doing exactly what we didn't want to do, and we didn't want to do it at the highest level. We weren't going out for pizza. We weren't going to movies. We were going out in the rain and the cold, and we were flying cars.
And it worked.
We did that every single freaking weekend for years.
Yeah. And
it became habitual.
It was, and it was interesting how many of those clients knew each other, to your story points, And so, and Columbus isn't a tiny town either. This isn't a matter of like there's six streets in town and everybody knows each other. It's just that in certain social circles, people know each other, and there's a great benefit to that when you're on the right side of that. So,
well, we had the doctors. Remember, we started working with the groups
little,
of doctors,
like mini centers of influence, basically.
Yep.
So, and we would have like certain office buildings where we'd go there and pick up 2 or 3 cars because they all know each other that way.
Bro, so was it Riverside Hospital? Was that what was the hospital where we had all those? We had a bunch of
I think it was
cardiologists.
Riverside, and they had we had some private practice ones as well. It worked.
And through that, we ended up having like the guy who was the CEO of Huntington National Bank.
Yep.
He would have us do his private jet, and I think I'll try to remember the name of it in a second. But I remember the first time I walked in that private jet, it was the fanciest thing I'd ever seen in my life. Fancier than any of the fancy cars. Yeah. It was spectacular. But so just an interesting side note, when we were doing aviation stuff, jets, any kind of, mostly jets, when we'd have to detail those, I actually had to have somebody who knew about jets. I had to have to hire him for those particular jobs because I didn't know anything about avionics, and I didn't know. And when our crew went out, they were just used to doing cars, and there was no. Yeah, exactly. You don't know what on an airplane wing is a hidden radar or whatever. So we were always very careful when we taped those things off with builder's tape, blue tape, so we wouldn't. Yeah, so that whole thing. But anyway, those experiences are all coming from the other side, doing what you don't want to do, and you don't want to do at the highest level.
We can do a lot of that.
And you know what, though, Julie? Every single thing that we're most proud of in our lives is coming just exactly from doing what you don't want to do and you don't want to do at the highest level.
That's
true.
There
are no exceptions.
I think that it's not just that, but doing that very consistently. But we didn't just dabble in flying cars. We did it every freaking weekend.
Right.
Rain or snow, whether we felt like it or not. And, there were certainly tons of real estate experiences like that as well.
Sure.
Our first, probably 100 deals came from door knocking, FSBOs, expireds, and open houses and doing tons of lead follow-up.
Well, because the hustle had become part of our DNA at that point.
Yeah, it was just habit.
When we followed Jack's advice and we ended up getting into, real estate, we got our licenses. And yes, I got a slightly higher score than Julie. Mm-hmm. Not that I'm remembering that.
You paid him off.
So, the hustle is what. So we didn't actually know that we were tracking for selling over 100 houses our first year. We didn't know. It was. I remember exactly where we were. We were sitting outside of a movie theater. After, of course, we weren't, obviously as real estate, so we weren't having to fly our cars anymore. But I remember one of the restaurants that we used to frequently flyer every Friday and Saturday night was in the same parking lot as this movie theater. But I remember sitting there. Waiting for the movie to start, and we were trying to add up. What month was it? Was it like July or June or August? It was warm out, which gives you about 2 days in Columbus, then it's cold again.
Yeah.
So, and I remember adding up all the houses we had sold, and we were just guessing. We did not have it organized. We did not remember them. There was no CRM.
I think we were cutting in our fingers.
Yeah, we were. And we remembered, that was Bob. Bob ended up doing 3 transactions, and then we wrote it all down the best we could. We didn't even write it down. We were just adding. Like, we were remembering together and counting together. And we got up to the number, I think it was like 75. Mm-hmm. And I remember going, 75, I don't know if that's good or bad. So we called up Rory, our broker. True story. And Rory was never long on words. Ever. So we called up Rory, and we said, Rory, quick question for you. And you have to talk really fast because Rory talked really fast. You guys think I talk really fast? Rory talks really fast.
Before he hangs up on you.
Yeah, exactly. Rory talks really, really fast. So we said, Rory, so we're trying to figure out if this is good or bad. Just let us know. So we've sold and closed, pending maybe, 75 houses. I do remember it being July.
I think that's about right.
And we want to know if that's good or bad. What how does that rank up to any other agents? Remember, first year, there was no internet. There was no, we were getting awards and plaques and crap, but we didn't pay much attention to that. We never did. And this is what he said. 75, huh? Call me when you get to 100. Click.
Yep.
That's what he did.
Then. Yep.
And I said to Julie, yeah, he said, I guess it's no big deal until you sell 100. So, whatever. Let's go watch our movie.
And he had been doing 100 plus for a long time. That was like his standard that you kind of suck unless you're basically near my level, right?
Well, but that wasn't the vibe.
No, I don't mean that. I mean that his perspective was that, and that we were blessed to have an experienced broker that had sold and would also be strangely motivational with his one-liners.
Right. And we did. And once we get to over 100, and then it's like it was the end of the year, and then National Association of Realtors found out about it. They named us Agent of the Year in the rookie category. We end up going on a national tour. Remax flies us around. We end up writing a book, 0 to 10 million in 1 year, and the book's no longer available. And we sort of then started having people ask us about coaching. But here's really what my big takeaway was from Rory reacting that way. And this is my coaching brain, not my agent brain. Had we sold 25 houses or whatever by July, and we had all of a sudden started having our asses kissed and all these awards and people telling us we're the greatest thing since forever, we probably would have had so much lizard brain satisfaction from the recognition from other people. Ego stroke. We probably wouldn't have been as motivated as we were to get to 100, because we wanted to get to 100 because what was 25 more after you'd already sold 75, right? And so I wonder sometimes when you hear all these plaques and these awards and all, oh, you're the agent of the month, and you're thinking to yourself, well, thanks to the trophy and whatnot, but I had one closing. That means nobody else in the office of 75 had any. Yep.
It's like an attendance award.
You're
kind of a low bar, people.
You're it. You're the only one that sold a house. And so you get these awards and plaques in real estate, and it's like, I sold 12 houses and I was agent of the year for my region. I mean, I appreciate it, but I mean, that stuff is really, it's dangerous, because what they're trying to do, and they being the awards givers, is they're trying to manipulate your ego. They're trying to essentially get you to want more, and they're really trying to seduce you into the idea. And your subconscious mind will definitely, especially if it's, it hadn't been experienced in attention like ours hadn't been at that level. And so your subconscious brain will start wanting more. So you'll start saying, I want more attention from recognition. I want more people to think I'm great. I want more. And then what happens is, if you ever had a profit motive, you'll forever lose it, because you are now, your North Star is that recognition from other people. And you will literally pay for it.
Well, I think that urge for recognition actually gets worse the more deals they do, because your experience with a bigger variety of deals means that you're going to deal with some stressful deals now and then, and you're going to feel underappreciated. Then somebody sends you a plaque and you're like, woohoo, because you get your head kicked in now and then the recognition is that much more significant. So I think you're right. If you had a profit motive, it goes away, and it's very hard to get it back once you fall into that trap.
It's the question sometimes we ask on our normal podcast, right? So if you 30-year-old self, and I'm talking to the 50-year-old version of you, if I said to the 30-year-old self, if you have to choose one, either being rich or famous, which would you choose? And the 30-year-old self, you guys know the answer, would always choose famous. Julie and I chose rich. And we chose rich because we always had the idea that we'd eventually get to be wealthy enough that we could live off the cash flow from our paid-off rentals. And guess what? We did it. It took until...
But that was a very conscious thought. That was not
and we had to fight against it because we had so much, the attention and everything. We didn't feel like we deserved it because we didn't really think we'd done anything to merit the amount of attention that we were getting.
That's true.
It was weird. We were just basically selling houses, and we were, we paid off our student loans the first year, and it was fun. It was fun working with you, But it's when you decide that you are going to want to be, even subconsciously is where it happens. If you choose, and you could be 50 and all of a sudden start being successful, or 60, and your ego, unless you have your head screwed on straight, it's going to want that attention. It's going to absolutely die for the attention and the recognition. And then what happens is you will then have made a decision that you're choosing fame over wealth. And your future self will definitely be pissed that you did that, because the future self is going to one day wake up and realize that the gratitude, or not the gratitude, but the recognition from strangers is a absolute false prophet, and it completely goes with the strongest winds in and out. The people that are congratulating you one minute are going to think you're an evil person the next. So always run a profit-driven business. So if you're 30 and you're realizing that these jackasses that are selling you guys into the believing that you can be social networking kings and queens, and that somehow is going to help you build a profitable real estate business, what they're doing is manipulating you through your ego, because they know, and this is, what is social networking? Narcissism. That's what it is. It's basically it's narcissism. That is, there's no real, useful information that's getting passed back and forth. It's sort of a fake splice of what you'd like your life to be. And it's one after the other, or it's the exact opposite. It's complete hate. And so you guys are thinking that you can somehow follow the path of all these false, guru coach types telling you can social network. They're appealing to your desire for recognition. And that's what Facebook is. Oh my gosh, I put something up, or Twitter. I want to see if someone responded. I want to see if I got a like. That is all your egos being manipulated. This is classic psychology, basic shit here, guys, right? Maslow, ring the bell, the dog salivates, same thing happens. you hear some sort of ping on your mobile device telling you that someone's responded to a Facebook post. You literally can be in the middle of the most passionate love-making session of your life and be thinking about what someone just posted or tweeted back.
Gotta go
right?
and check it.
Exactly. Do you guys get it? That's all because they know how to manipulate you, and it's all basically a dopamine-based response in your brain, and you get addicted to it. And the more you get addicted to it, the more of that dopamine response, more you have to essentially induce it in order to have the same chemical release. This is all brain science, and so you'd even do more essentially ego stuff to draw even more attention to yourself, to get even more recognition. And you become more and more beholden to strangers giving you recognition, and that becomes your currency, not actual wealth. And then you essentially destroy your future because you're feeding so much into your ego's desire to be loved. That's really what you want, loved and accepted. You've foregone the profit motive, and the people that induced you into wanting the recognition did it intentionally, because then now what? They've got your money. Your broker gives you unmerited attention, at least on the level in which most agents receive it. For what? You never asking about commission splits. You never asking about office expenses, because that's the person that gave you recognition. You're certainly going to be willing to pay for it. So you're not going to go and grind them over commission, are you? And then you're going to have, you guys get the point here? Which, by the way, is the reason I love eXp Realty. One of the reasons I love it so much. When that business was created, Glenn Sanford created it he tells a story. I watched a video of it. It's probably was the most moving thing, was the most influential thing on Julie and I aligning with eXp Realty, which is probably one of the best, smartest business moves we've ever done. In this video, he was talking about how, I think it was in 2000, he was, looking back, and he was talking about how in like the real estate crash, he was in real estate himself, selling real estate, and maybe I'm getting my facts wrong, and then he ends up having this sort of epiphany about eXp Realty and puts these thoughts together, and the business model is like nothing I've ever seen before. It's so agent-centric. But the thing that he said was, I've seen what this industry can do to an agent, especially in a downturn. I'm going to build something to make it so that agents don't have to suffer, and agents can have multiple streams of income. Agents can basically retire, wealthy if they fully embrace the opportunity. Agents can have control of their own businesses. And I'm not going to, he was with Keller Williams at the point previously, I'm not going to make the same agent manipulating, moves that maybe Keller Williams did, right? I might be remembering some of this wrong, but you get the gist of it. Julie, when you watched that video with me, what was your memory of it?
Just, the authenticity of it and the forward thinking that, there's so many benefits in so many different directions. A lot of brokerages, it's like, okay, I'm only here because, like, the name, because I think I have to be a Sotheby's agent,
Right.
But that's really most of what you get.
Well, but the reality of it is nowadays
has all of that.
Nowadays, the brand doesn't even matter.
That's my point, is that most brokerages, there might be one reason you're there, but really you're just not feeling it, okay? If eXp covers your bases, you have to put your license somewhere, you get all of the marketing support, you lose a lot of costs that you definitely are sustaining right now that's unnecessary. I mean, there's one thing that COVID's taught us is you don't need to be going to an office to be doing a lot of business. Most of our coaching clients are having a really kick-ass year, and some of them their best quarters ever, and they haven't been to their office for 4 months.
Well, eXp is quickly becoming the most dominant real estate brand in the world, not just the United States. I mean, they're adding so many agents, 31 or 32,000 agents now. It's incredible. It's the fastest growing real estate brokerage. But one of the founding tenets, aside from Glenn realizing that he needs to essentially do the right thing for agents, which he definitely does, building multiple streams of income, making it so the commission split is something reasonable, making it so agents can actually save money. They don't have to, but at the core of it too, there is not a lot of ego manipulation that goes on at eXp.
Well, actually, that's something that I've definitely observed because everybody is literally on the same team.
Right.
Agents are way more supportive, and I've even had eXp agents who came from somewhere else, because pretty much everybody did that's eXp, say, I think of my agent colleagues completely differently now, and I want to help them at a higher level.
Right.
And I, honestly, if I think back to all the other models, I don't think I've ever heard that anywhere else.
No.
Not really. Not truly agent-centric, agent-owned, agent control,
well,
and you just
look
get
at
so
the
many.
stock. The
That's
stock has doubled this year. I actually heard a gal on a conference call last week talking about the fact that in
Yeah, that's a great story.
2016, she was awarded what amounts to $16,000 in EXPI stock because she hit icon status. So icon status at EXP, so your cap is 16,000, which you earn about 80,000, and on an 80-20 split, you'll pay in 16,000. And then when you sell an additional 20 units, or you have a total GCI of 500 grand, then you qualify for icon status. I'm skipping a bunch of details, but that's the gist of it. When you qualify for icon status, that means that you will then be given, essentially awarded back, the equivalent amount of 16,000 in EXPI stock. So EXPI stock at the beginning of this year was like $8 a share, $8 and something, $7, some, in that range. And now it's trading in the low 20s, okay, high teens, low 20s. Well, in 2016, I don't even know what it was trading for. But she was awarded $16,000 with EXPI stock because she hit icon. So if you guys aren't figuring this out, in essence, she doesn't really technically end up paying the broker. Well, technically she pays the broker something, but when you look at the net of it,
but she gets $16,000.
She gets all the money back, so she didn't end up paying.
But look, stop there for a second.
That's $16,000 in stock that she was given. Now, as of last week, is over $100,000, and she didn't do anything. And I know another gal who was with EXP. This may have been, maybe she's been with EXP for like 6 or 7 years. And she is a multimillionaire, and she's in her 60s. I had her on the podcast, and she's a multimillionaire just because when she was awarded the stock and she bought shares too, she was buying it for less than $1.
That's incredible.
It is incredible.
But think of the brilliance of that model, because to cap, you're a motivated agent, right? That you want to cap as fast as you possibly can. And you get rewarded that cap money back at that next level, which keeps you also motivated.
Right.
Then you get it back. You didn't have to write a check for it. Yes, you paid your cap money, but it's not like you were, buying it whatever. And then there's even a discount involved. And it's incredible.
So you can take, I think it's 5% of your commission, and you can buy the EXPI at a 10% discount.
It's amazing. And then you get, as you said, awarded stock for other benchmarks that
you
happen.
sponsor somebody, you get a sponsor allocation of $400 to the XPI stock.
Yeah, so when we say awarded, you're not buying it. It is literally being given to you.
Yeah, well, there's a vesting period of 3 years, but that is the gist of it.
It's
but
amazing.
I think, it's an amazing company. And so many agents that we have attracted, that we've brought into EXP, hundreds and soon thousands, hearing from them and sharing the air with them, via, through Zoom or whatever, and hearing the gratitude they have towards Glenn and this company because of the fact that he masterminded this idea, and then so many thousands, now tens of thousands of other people helped build it. That is, I don't even know how to express how magical that feels.
I know. It's pretty amazing. You
It is
often
amazing.
say, one of the best decisions we've ever made. And, I don't know if people realize the consternation that we put ourselves through before we made that decision. Years. And, but aren't we glad that we did, And I think that I'm grateful on the level that, whatever influence we have to help them make good decisions like that, that makes me feel good as a coaching organization too. That we're able to reach more people in a variety of different ways and to help them.
Well, that was the thing that drew ultimately for me. So agents would ask us all the time, which broker should we choose? And honestly, they're all the same, right? So, if you had asked me that 2 years ago, I'll tell you right now, I just would have said, doesn't matter, whichever one's closest, or whoever has the best donuts on Wednesday office day. I don't know. I mean, it wasn't much of a difference. They're all the same. I mean, Sotheby's is the same as Coldwell Banker, is the same as Prudential, is the same as I mean, what's the difference? There's varying degrees of this or the other thing, or perceived brand, Here, ultimately, guys, they're basically all the same. And it's just essentially your tolerance for paying. Oh, this one gives you leads. Oh, this one gives you support. And this, they're all the same. They're all basically the same. They have to be the same in order to basically recruit and retain agents. It's not like one of these big companies is going to have a huge advantage over the others, and then comes EXP. And so what EXP does is it makes the agents, in essence, owners of the company through the stock. You can, by the way, buy the stock on NASDAQ, but also through the revenue share model. And that's absolute pure magic. I did a little poll. Did I tell you about this? On our EXP revenue share group? Yeah. And I asked, it was a simple question. How much money would you have to have to coming in per month in order to feel financially free?
You meant passively by a revenue share.
Yeah, passively by a revenue share.
Not just money coming in that, commissions.
Right. And it started out at like $1,000 a month, $3,500 a month, $5,000 a month, $7,500 a month, and I went all the way up to like $100,000 a month. The most frequent or the most common answer was $7,500 a month. And there were, I don't remember how many people. I did this survey twice, actually. There were dozens of people that once they got to $7,500 a month around there, they would feel financially free. And I thought, wow, isn't that amazing? And then if you do the math and how many people you actually have to sponsor on average to get to $7,500 per month, it is a shockingly small number because there's so many agents that are joining EXP right now. There's so much incredible momentum. And so, it's so bizarre to me. In just the past 2 years, how EXP has gone, it was right on the edge of name recognition. People, like when we started with EXP, I was hearing EXP who, and now everybody knows what EXP is. Everyone's EXP curious or on their way to joining EXP, it seems, or as soon as they realize what they're leaving on the table with where they're at. And some people will say, well, we have profit share at our business. Well, how much profit share do you make? How does that actually work? Well, in a profit share model, they're sharing with whatever is left after they run the business, the brokerage, and paying all the staff and whatnot. And if they choose to have no profit left in the brokerage, there is no profit share. That in itself means that you can sponsor a bunch of agents at, say, for example, Keller Williams. And I'm not bagging on Keller Williams, it's a great brokerage, but you can sponsor a bunch of agents at Keller Williams. And if those agents' brokerages essentially never turn a profit, you're never going to make any profit share on those agents. And so what's the point of recruiting in a model like that? It's actually going to work against you. Well, EXP, what Glenn did was he made it revenue share. And this was for you guys that don't understand this, and truthfully, I didn't quite understand the power of it until, I'm thick-headed. I didn't quite understand the power of it until we got started. But revenue share, so a commission check comes in from a real estate transaction that someone on your teams, transacted, and you get paid off the top before the brokerage, before the agent, before taxes. There's no delusion of the percent that you're getting paid. It's off the top versus, profit share, which gets paid on the back. So what Glenn did is he said, you know what? We can be virtual. We don't have to have all these fixed cost offices and franchises and regions and all this other stuff. And he thought of all this, guys, before anyone else did. Genius, this guy. And then what we can do is, because we can... we're going to not have to spend all this money on all this middle management and infrastructure and these legacy costs that really the industry doesn't need. Who really goes to real estate offices anyway? We're just going to give that money in the form of revenue share back to the agents that are helping us build the brokerage. And so now there are agents out there who are making money at EXP, who are making money from selling houses. They're making money from, maybe they have some rental properties. They're making money from the appreciation of the stock, and they're making money from revenue share. And there's actually 7 other ways you can make money at EXP too. So to think that there's this brokerage that exists now, and I tell this story and I really mean it. Had Julie and I'm talking, this formidable Julie and I, we're sitting outside that movie theater again. We're plotting and planning and, what we're going to do to buy the number of rental properties that we needed to basically have them all paid off, and sort of in our minds figuring out how much money we'd have to come up with to put down the houses, how long it would take. And the thing we didn't plan for but definitely ends up happening is when you have a big goal of having dozens of paid off properties before you are 40, that paid off, that money isn't coming from it. You're having to earn that money. So when Julie and I were making consistent money because we were listing based, that money wasn't going to lifestyle. That money was going to paying off the rental properties and buying more. We ended up doing is basically paying cash for them. So we ended up essentially developing. We got our lifestyle to the point where we were willing to forgo, a lot of the niceties that some of you guys take for granted, because we were saving up money to buy another rental property for 120 or 150 grand that's now worth like twice as much, right? And that's what we did. And we did that for years. And so that meant we, for years, sacrificed for the idea that when we were 40 and Jules was 39, that we'd be able to live off our cash flow from the rental properties. Well, when I was 41 and she was 40, we actually accomplished that goal. But I have to tell you, it was in light, if the EXP revenue share was available to us then, we wouldn't have bought a single stinking rental property.
Nope.
And we would have gone on more vacations and had more fun.
We would have had
and we would have had
more
kids.
time.
We would have had more children too.
Yes, I believe that's true.
Yeah, because the amount of sacrificing we had to do to accomplish that goal was insurmountable. And by the way, always having that goal of having the paid off properties always made it so we had to run a profit driven business, because we were very mindful. There were 2 years which we weren't. When we weren't as mindful as we should have been. But for the most part, we were very mindful of the profit we were making, because we had goals that we wanted to accomplish and we stuck to them, except for maybe 2 years when we didn't really accumulate as many rentals as we had the momentum for going into those 2 years. With revenue share, guys, we're making more off revenue share now than we are off our rental properties that we took basically 20 years to accumulate, more than 20 years to accumulate.
Which, incidentally, even paid off. Just because it's paid off doesn't mean all the appliances work.
Yeah.
Okay, those things live on. The time, of course, if I'm managing some of them, but most of them we're paying property managers to pay them. The
property taxes are going up now.
It doesn't.
It's crazy.
The expense and the hassle and the time don't go away until you sell them.
Yeah. Well, and then you don't want to sell them because then you have to pay taxes on them.
Exactly. Right. So it doesn't get better necessarily. Yes, you can pay it off, but that's as better as it's going to get. I always think to myself, that one's finally completely rehabbed, and then they'll break something new, or there'll be a storm, or it's like never ending. But I agree with you. Had EXP been around back then, we would not have been motivated to go through that hassle and sacrifice.
There's no way we would have.
No way. We'd be so much further ahead now, So, but some of our listeners are in that position.
We probably would be further ahead. We probably would have been less conservative with our money buying rental properties, and we would have been willing to take more risks.
Yeah.
But you know what? It doesn't suck.
It doesn't suck. But
we're living at the Ritz-Carlton in Puerto Rico.
We're not complaining here, guys.
Basically by the beach in our own private villa.
But
it worked out.
My point is that there are people listening right now, whether they're grizzled veterans or whether they're 20 years old. The benefits to making that decision now, today. It's not going to take you 20 years of rental properties. It's going to take you and it doesn't take. You don't have to recruit 200 agents. You can do really killer with maybe 10 or 12.
My favorite,
and feel the impact.
My favorite call, or when I get a text. If you guys want to talk to me about EXP, just text me directly at 512-758-0206. But I'll tell you my favorite one, 512-758-0206, is when I get a text from somebody who has a team or somebody with a brokerage. Mm-hmm. Because in neither scenario, they've been listening to us for a while, they maybe read our book, and they're realizing that their profit sucks, and they basically allowed their ego to run their business making decisions for the past few decades. They're at a point in their lives, usually about our age, where they haven't accumulated enough, they realize they have no plan B, and they're basically financially
not as far ahead as they had wanted to be.
Right. Now they've had a great lifestyle, people have kissed their asses, they've got every plaque they can possibly imagine, but they're at the point where they're looking back and they're realizing I chose fame over wealth. And then when they hear us tell that story, that's something that really is going to be depressing, but the flip side to it is it should be cathartic, because then it'll allow all of you guys to make different decisions.
And it's not too late.
It's not too late, because EXP is just getting started. That's the thing, is that 2 years ago it's EXP who I'd hear half the time, and now it's like, am I too late?
I know, and you're not too late. You're only too late if you wait. You're not too late if you make that decision now.
Yeah.
Well, boy, did we ever think it? We probably waited more than we should.
No, I didn't think that. I wish we'd started sooner. That's what I wish. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So don't. I want them all to say thank you, past fill in the blank with your name for making that decision.
So guys, look, your takeaway is this: if you've not had an EXP conversation with me, individual agent, new agent, seasoned agent, somewhere in the middle, if you have a team, if you have a brokerage, you owe it to yourself to have this conversation. If you're a regular listener, as many as you are, you know that we are expecting next year to be a completely different real estate market. The news, the headlines about the great return of the market, and everything's great and dandy, and the home sales are up. You guys have to realize that home sales still aren't even anywhere near as close as they were pre-pandemic. And furthermore, what those stories are doing is they're looking back. So they're celebrating things that happened 60 to 90 days ago, not things that are happening in the future. And as far as what your job is as a real estate professional, as an entrepreneur, as a father, as a wife, as a husband, is you need to be looking forward and realizing what you're entering into is going to be a completely different market, completely different skill set. We talk about this every day on our show. You absolutely, positively have to be looking at EXP, and we would love to have you as part of our EXP. We'd love to be partners with you at EXP. You can be partners with Julie and I at EXP. If that's something that's interesting to you, please feel free to text me at 512-758-0206. Hey, Julie, today's show wasn't as crazy as our normal one.
No.
Our normal Sunday show.
After their eyeballs and stories, hope you guys, got something from that. Each and every one of them had meaning that we see now, looking back. Thank you, Pastor Tim and Julie, for having those experiences so we can share them with all of you guys. Hopefully you do something with that, even if that's just being more serious about following up on every lead every day, because you never know when you're going to have that dirt call that turns into multi-million-dollar listings worth of business. Right. So, hopefully you guys enjoyed that.
You guys don't need to do what we did to basically be winners at EXP. You don't need to write books. You don't need to have the biggest coaching company, and you don't need to do what we did. You don't need to have a bunch of rental properties. You don't need to put anywhere near the amount of effort we did. That's the truth. What you just have to do is stop being fearful, stop being a skeptic, and take a hard look at EXP and embrace it for the amazing opportunity it is. And then you're going to realize the thought process goes from I'm not interested towards I'm sort of interested towards oh my God, now I get it. I can't stop thinking about it. And then the next phase beyond that is I can't believe I didn't do this sooner. And the next phase beyond that is I need to really embrace this for all it is because I can realize a different future in 12, 24, 36 months. It's spectacular. This is the last best, EXP is the last best business opportunity of Julie and I's lives. I'm confident of that. And many of you, too, are about the same age as we are. So you need to realize that if you're not wanting to face down a recession or a depression, as it's probably going to start being called here soon, look for that to happen probably around the election. If it's not, whatever's coming next, whatever it is, our crystal ball is no clearer than yours. The reality of it is you're going to be so much more thankful and grateful to yourself for having aligned with EXP because of the fact you're going to most likely have created multiple streams of income for yourself. So I'd love to have the conversation with you. You can text me directly to my cell phone number. It's 512-758-0206. In the meantime, guys, this is not our normal podcast. Their normal podcast is usually much more buttoned down, but do continue to listen. We really appreciate it. Thanks for continuing to make the book Harris Rules bestseller on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, all the other places. And thank you guys for keeping this the number one listened to daily podcast in the nation. Have a fantastic day, and we'll talk with you on the show tomorrow.
This podcast is a part of the C-Suite Radio Network. For more top business podcasts, visit c-suiteradio.com.